It's not easy, but it certainly can be very worthwhile.
Welcome to the Service to Syndication podcast, where we interview the biggest and most successful real estate entrepreneurs, investors, capital raisers in the world who have worn the uniform of this great country, those who provide services to our men and women in uniform, and other service-oriented professionals to provide you with the tool sets, the mindsets, and the skill sets to help you conquer your dreams and goals in real estate and to use this wealth creation vehicle so you can live a more successful, happy, and fulfilled life of generosity and prosperity. If what you desire is time, lifestyle, and financial freedom, you've come to the right place. We will bring to you the best real estate entrepreneurs who will give you the insights, the knowledge, experience, skills, so you can go out and crush it in whatever real estate asset class you desire. So grab a pencil and paper, sit back, and enjoy the ride on the Service to Syndication podcast. Hello, my servicemen and women and other service providers. Welcome to another episode of the Service to Syndication Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Cedric Marlow. I am a U.S. Navy vet. Here on the Service to Syndication Real Estate Podcast, we interview the most successful real estate entrepreneurs, capital raisers in the world, where most have donned the uniforms of our great country. We aim to provide the tool sets, the mindset, and skill sets for you to achieve your personal and business goals while using real estate as a wealth creation vehicle to help you live a more successful, happy, and fun-filled life. I am super excited today because I have with me Dr. Benjamin DeVore, who is a top-notch real estate investor and clinical psychologist. Before I properly introduce our exciting guest to you, I want to ask a favor of you. Please, if you get some value out of this interview, if you get some insight, mindset shift, if you learn a new skill, new information, receive inspiration or motivation to go out and take some action to make some progress in your life, please share this episode with some of your friends. Send it to someone you know who might be or could be interested in real estate. Share it on your social media, post it on your wall, or share it in your stories. Help us spread our message while you help others. And for all of you who share this episode, I want to say thank you. Again, everyone, I have with me Dr. Benjamin Brad DeVore, who is an active duty naval psychologist with 6 years of service and has been selected for promotion to O4. He holds a PhD in clinical psychology from Virginia Tech and is completing a postdoctoral fellowship in neuropsychology at the University of California, San Diego. He served as command psychologist aboard the USS Harry S. Truman during the 2021-22 fleet deployment in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In 2023, Dr. DeVore entered real estate investing, starting with a single family property, and now closing on a 7-unit apartment complex in Idaho. He invests with a team of active duty and veteran military members along the 15 corridor through Idaho and Montana, specializing in underwriting, deal analysis, negotiation, and value-add strategies. Outside of his career, he mentors young men on healthy masculinity and is writing a book for expecting fathers. He's passionate about helping men thrive through strong relationships, health, finances, and spirituality. First off, welcome. The first thing that I like to do with my guests is just kind of walk us through your real estate journey in 75 seconds or less, and we'll just start to unpack a lot of everything that you have going on.
Sure. So 75 seconds or less, I better be quick. So I've always been interested in real estate as an investment vehicle. Got a single family home using the VA loan like many of our service members do. Was able to turn that into a rental property that's doing quite well. We make about $800, $700 to $800 cash flow on that every month, which is great. And then got involved with a community called ADPI. I know you've had Chris Lockwood on before. I know that some of our guys have been on. And so got trained up with them and then was able to form a team through that experience. And now we're diving into the property we're buying is in Pocatello, Idaho. So we're in the midst of the due diligence process. We got our PSA in, we're getting all the monies together, but we're locked in. It's a seller finance deal that I'm happy to dive into the nuance with, how we got a seller finance and all that good stuff, because I know that those are kind of the unicorns out there. So happy to talk about any of that.
Awesome, awesome. So you've had a unique journey as a naval psychologist. What drew you to clinical psychology, and how did that path lead you into military service?
Sure. So I actually was drawn to what I'm getting my postdoctoral program, like education in, which is neuropsychology. So everybody asks, well, what's neuropsychology? Neuropsychology is looking at the relationship between the brain and what happens in the brain, and then how that translates into behavior. So your psychologist, if somebody comes in and says I'm depressed, they want to treat that depression. Neuropsychologists say, okay, well, what's happening in the brain? What are the neurotransmitters? What's the electrical signals? What's going on that's contributing to whatever it is? And then how does that become how we behave? And so I was really passionate about that. I got my undergrad degree in it, but then I kind of split off and pursued the entertainment industry. I did some film commercials, also got involved with restaurants and bars like most actors do. And then came back to it and got my master's in my 30s in psychology, and then got into my PhD program, which had a focus on neuropsychology. And when I was in my master's, I had always wanted to serve, and I had gotten wrapped up with the Marines when I was in college. I was going through OCS or I'm sorry, not OCS, sorry. I was going through ROTC, getting ready to go to OCS, and being young and dumb, I did a backflip and landed on my head and got a concussion. And so they said, well, sorry, man, you're not going to be medically cleared for a little while, so go hang out. So I went and did some other stuff, but then in my 30s, that bug to serve was still there, and so I got wrapped up with a chief who was a Coast Guard. He was a Coast Guard Reserves chief, and he said, "Hey, listen, if you're interested, we can see about getting you in the Coast Guard." So I pushed that and was able to enlist in the Coast Guard Reserves. I served 3.5 years with the Coast Guard. I got E5, which was great, made second class. But they don't have, I then got into my PhD, and the Coast Guard doesn't have psychologists. They use Navy psychologists. So I figured, well, if I'm going to be an officer, or I'm sorry, if I'm going to get a doctorate, I should probably be an officer, but I can't do that in the Coast Guard. So I put in a package with the Navy, and I got conditionally released because I was on 8 years with the Coast Guard, but they conditionally released me if I got the commission, and I got picked up. So that's how I ended up in the Navy.
Wow. I was laughing there for a second until I realized you were serious about the backflip and landing on your head.
Yeah, I really did.
It almost sounded like a joke, honestly. I was laughing. Wow. Change of fate. But, hey, I guess it landed you on your feet eventually.
Yeah, it ended up working out okay.
Wow. So what mental health trends or challenges do you commonly see among active duty service members, and how do you approach those as a leader and a clinician?
Sure. Yeah, I think that our military is at a very unique time in its history in terms of mental health, because in the past, there was a lot of stigma with mental health. I mean, a lot of our veterans, a lot of the older guys I'll talk to, they would never go see psych. I mean, you have these guys with clear PTSD who were exposed to serious trauma and serious stuff, but they're never going to go see psych because there was just so much stigma there. And that's very much changed with our younger sailor soldiers. The younger generation doesn't have that same stigma, which is good. On the positive side, that's good because they know that if they're struggling with mental health, that it's okay to reach out, that it's not going to be career ending. It doesn't mean that if you go see psych, they're going to make you disappear. They called us the wizard for the longest time because we'd make people disappear. And so that stigma is now going away, which is good. But one of the problems that we're running into is people know that there's disability connected with, mental health conditions, which again, if somebody has PTSD and has had some really bad stuff happen and they're having they can't function, then that's appropriate. But one of the challenges that we run into, a lot of our younger folk, they come into the military, they're having a hard time adjusting to the military and the demands of the military. They get frustrated because they can't get on TikTok, or they have, some E6, E7 yelling at them, telling them to do stuff, and they don't want to do it. And so then they have a hard time with that. and they think that that means they have a mental health problem, and then they get it in their head that if they come see psych, then they might be able to not only get out, but then also get money on the outside because of the disability piece. And so it's this very challenging place where we have people who need the services, who need mental health care, but then we have other people who don't really need it, but are banging on the door demanding it because they think they deserve it. And so it creates this really difficult spot for the mental health providers that all branches are trying to negotiate and figure out how to work with this to make sure we're providing the services to people who need them, while also trying to parse out how do we determine who's okay and who maybe just needs a little extra support from the command versus actual mental health problems.
Yeah, yeah. I was in well before the TikTok and, internet was literally just coming online. And,
Yeah.
it was one of those things where it wasn't a deterrent for us. It wasn't one of those things that we had to have. When we were on deployments and it was just us, it was just the people, the sailors that were there.
Yeah.
We depended on one another, and that's what it was. But I definitely understand that, especially now mental health and I'm really happy that mental health has started to rear its head in the military, because there are those traumas out there that people
Oh yeah.
have had, and it needs people like yourself to understand, or at least help them understand what they're going through, and listen to it, and to help them to cope as best they can, if there's coping mechanisms there.
Well, and my heart always goes out to a lot of the guys who have been through some hard stuff, guys and gals, that who have been through some stuff and are suffering in silence and carrying that baggage with them. Because I've talked to so many chiefs, senior chiefs, even master chiefs, who just were really beat up and had a hard time, and they just carry it. And then they're coming to the end of their career, they're into their time in the Navy, and almost consistently. And for your listeners, if there's anybody who's listening out there that's getting to kind of that stage where you're looking at either transitioning out or you just transitioned out, one of the things that I've consistently heard from our senior enlisted is that sense of like, I bled, like broke my body, I did everything I could for the service, and now I'm at the end, and it's kind of like, thanks for your service, or I get out. I've heard that over and over, like that transition where it feels like they gave so much, but then they're not given, or not necessarily they're not given, but it's like, it's that the military does a really good job of making us believe that it can't function without us, that if we're not doing our job, things will fall apart. But then as soon as we transition out, it's like, oh yeah, you're fine. We got this new guy coming in, get out. And that can lead to, for a lot of people, like a sense of feeling like, well, what was the point? Like, why did I do this, all of this? Why did I sacrifice so much? Why did I go on so many deployments and miss my kids growing up, and like trade all of this for them to not really appreciate what I did? And so if anybody out there is listening and you have that feeling, or you've felt that way, one, no, you're not alone. I've heard it multiple times, but then two, also recognize that what you did matters. Like what you did genuinely matters. Don't let the last year or two of your service define the years, that all the time you did before, all of the things you did that you can be proud of, the different deployments you went on, the sailors you helped, the people you connected with, the people you impacted. Don't let the last year or two of that really poison all of that for you. And if you're finding it hard to get past that point, find someone to talk to about it. That's the best way to kind of process that last piece and kind of get through that sense of like, what I did doesn't matter, because it does matter. And so being able to talk to somebody about that and kind of really bounce it off them and really kind of talk about those feelings matter. So if you're having that, please reach out to somebody, connect. The VA has resources if you're able to get them. If not, go through your insurance, figure out ways to get connected if needed.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. And so how has your training in neuropsychology deepened your understanding of military resilience and leadership?
So I think that neuropsychology is such a very specific area within medicine, and the idea of resiliency is for the last 10 years-ish, that idea of resiliency has sort of been the golden button that the military would desperately like to understand. So when we say resiliency, the best way for us to kind of define this is, let's say you take two members who come from similar backgrounds. Let's say they're two enlisted members both from kind of rough backgrounds, some rough streets. They've seen some stuff. They've been through some scary things, and they join the military to get away from that. Go forward. They're both deployed. Let's say they're, current situation, they are deployed and they're responding to some of the Houthi conflicts going on right now in the Middle East. They're exposed to some rocket fire. One member is able to excel and is able to kind of move through that situation and come out the other side. They're rocking and rolling, they're promoting. That situation kind of invigorated them, and they're able to focus and get the job done and move forward. The other one can't. The other one is just terrified. They're not able to function. They stop showing up to work. They're in their rack. It doesn't matter how much their senior chief tries to support them. They're just not coming out the other side. So you have two people who basically came from very similar backgrounds, similar paths, same thing happened to them. One goes one way, the other one goes the other way. And the way that the military defines that, the person going right is through resiliency. This is that resiliency, that grit, that factor that allows that person to move this way. And so a lot of money and effort and research has gone into trying to figure out what makes that difference. And part of the challenge is it's incredibly complex. The idea that the brain, that any two brains are alike is not accurate. Every human's brain is unique. There are some generalities that are similar for the brain. So for the most part, right-handed folks, the left side of the brain does language. So if you have a stroke and I punch a hole in the left side of the brain, you're going to have speech deficits. And that's the majority of people. I mean, when I say majority, I'm talking like 90% of right-handers, that'll be the case. Left-handers, it's a little bit different. So again, we have that nuance, we have that uniqueness. But even within that 90%, there's still some that will see a stroke in the left hemisphere and they're speaking fine. And by all accounts, we should say, okay, wait a minute, there should be some serious speech problems, but they're fine. So, so part of the challenge with really trying to define this idea of resiliency as a broad concept without taking into account individual differences is just going to be unsuccessful. And so I think that that's one of the big things. This is sort of a roundabout way of answering your question, but I think it's a pretty complicated question because both resiliency and to extension leadership. I think that when I was on the ship, when I was on the Truman, I used to talk to, I would do presentations with the chief's mess and talk to them about leadership because no chief, no young chief, no E6 going to E7 or even like chief to senior chiefs, E7 to E8 wants to be the leader that their subordinates are like, I hate that guy. Like that guy sucks. Do not get into that chief shop. You're going to be miserable if you're there. Nobody wants to be that guy. But people end up being that guy. Like they end up doing that. And part of it is it's all of these individual differences of, you might, you get the training, you might go through the stuff, you get the education, but then your own individual challenges, your own past, your own belief system, the way that you think, the way that you see the world, all of that, which is all in your brain, influences then how we behave and what we do. And so when we're looking at resiliency, that's that individual difference where, person A who was able to go right, he had he has different beliefs, internalizations, experiences, ideas that allow him to go this way, whereas this person has different ones that allow him to go this way. Same thing with leadership. Good leaders. I worked with now Admiral Duff aboard the USS Truman. Incredible leader. Absolutely. I mean, I feel so lucky to have worked with him, and he was absolutely brilliant, incredibly in tune with the ship and really dedicated to sailor success. That was his defining thing. And a lot of that was his own individual leaderships, where you have other captains of carriers who don't necessarily do the Truman captain not too long ago got fired because they ran into another ship. So, it's just, I think that individual factor really can't be underestimated. And it's one of the things that the military pushes really hard to make us all the same, but it's impossible. You just can't make everybody the same.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just thinking back on when I was in, there were several of us that came from various backgrounds, similar backgrounds, I should say. And there were others that came from way better circumstances that didn't thrive. Whereas myself, I thrived while I was in the military. And it was more so, I would say didn't realize it at the time because I was so young, that I had goals and aspirations to what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be. And I knew that, the military was a stepping stone to getting me there. So totally agree with everything you're saying. Yeah.
And it's interesting because if you look at one of the, like a major driving factor that influences that piece, kind of what you're talking about is, and we use this term liberally, but is mindset. It's this idea of mindset. And it's one of the things that I get really passionate about and excited about when I'm working with younger guys is helping them to understand how literally, if you have so a great example is, so I went through boot camp with both the Coast Guard and the Navy. And so when I went through boot camp with the Coast Guard, it was my first time going through boot camp. So I didn't know anything about what to expect. Well, officer training school with the Navy, but part of boot camp is that when your drill instructors are coming at you and yelling at you and like saying all of these things to you, it's actually just part of the training. Like it's nothing more than just like, in a lot of ways it's scheduled. It's like, oh, it's 3 o'clock. We need to PT. So we're going to, kick open the doors and scream at them that they've been messing up when actually we just want them to go run. And so we're kind of, they use that as a way to kind of like, not necessarily trick you, but it's part of the program. It's part of them helping you understand what the thing is. And so when I figured that out at Coast Guard boot camp, then when I went to officer training, and they would do it there, I was just like, oh, this is just on the schedule. Like, we didn't do anything wrong. We haven't messed up at all. It's just part of the schedule. Like, it's 3 o'clock, so it's time to go exercise. And that little mindset shift when I was in the Coast Guard, I felt like I was failing, like I was a screw up. Things were terrible. They didn't like me, da 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 da. But then in the Navy, when I realized that, no, it's just on the schedule, none of that was there. Like, not a single thing was there. So it's just that mindset shift makes a big difference. All right.
All right. Okay, so you started real estate investing in 2023 and are already closing on a 7-unit apartment complex. What inspired you to step into that space, let's say the commercial space?
Yeah, so I think a big part of it was, well, Chris Lockwood, who you've had on your show before, he got a chance to connect with him, and he was kind of a big driver of the idea of shifting into commercial. But I think a big piece of it is the scalability of commercial. I also, a good friend of mine, Vadim, he's really involved with the ADPI as well, and he and I talked about it. He was on the ship with me on the Truman, so we talked about it there. The scalability of commercial. I like the idea of working on a team, but I also I like that with commercial real estate, it is, single family homes, if you build a portfolio, is certainly a business. But I think with commercial, there is a larger component of like establishing a business plan and figuring out what service you're providing and how to leverage all of the different, levers within commercial real estate to provide value to your investors, but then also to provide values to the people that are, renting from you in any venue, whether that's, your self-storage, your mobile home parks, your, boat docks, whatever, whoever's renting from you, like that's, you're providing a service there.
Right, right. Now, can you walk us through how your military background and psychology training have shaped the way you approach underwriting and negotiating commercial deals?
Sure. Yeah. So underwriting, I think, for me, is largely, I really like being able to make the numbers make sense. Like, I'm not an Excel guy, and a lot of underwriters are really, they like the data itself. I'm not. That's not me. I like puzzles. And so like a good example is on the current property that we're looking at. We got some of the financials, and I'm going through it, and I'm realizing that some of the, like in their bank statements, some of the deposits and withdrawals that are supposed to be for the rent coming in, expenses going out, aren't really matching up. And it's a mom and pop shop, and they warned us that, some of their stuff is, that they have used some of the things for another property that's within their company and things like that. So just trying to really have to navigate all of that and piece that all together, especially when we're looking at a property. I was part of a team that we were looking at self-storage, and I mean, nothing against brokers. I mean, brokers have, they do their job, and some are better than others and all that stuff. But the number of OMs, operating memorandums that I looked at, where then once I got the financials and started to really kind of tease them apart, that just what they're proposing in their OM was so far, it was, and I shouldn't be surprised anymore because I've looked at so many, but I just am consistently like, man, like I've seen OMs that didn't even account for management, property management, and then we get the numbers and suddenly I'm looking at $5,000 a month in property management, like they're saying that their rents are, $1,000, and then when we really dial down to it, that's their rents from 2023, but their rents in 2024 were actually like 40,000 less, and so it's just like stuff like that I like figuring those pieces out. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for myself personally, I'm kind of like, I don't like figuring them out. I, honestly, like if I got an OM from a broker, I want it to just make sense. When I put it into my underwriting tool, I want them to make sense, but I totally agree with you. A lot of times they don't. And we know that, brokers, they're working on the behalf of the seller, and they're working, majority of the numbers you get are on pro forma. If the sun shined every day, there were no clouds, no rain at all, this is what you could get.
Yeah. I
Like
will
will work.
tell you, I'll tell you what, you get a pro forma that has some serious holes in it. The first thing that should go in your mind is I've got negotiating power now.
Yeah.
That is as soon as, because anytime I shifted my mindset with that because I used to get frustrated where I'm like, why can't they just give me straightforward, like the actual stuff? But
Right.
then I started to realize that, like, wait a minute, if I can find serious gaps or problems in the OM, I can go back to the broker and be like, hey, listen, like the risk that you guys are quoting us, a cap rate of, 7.7.5. That cap isn't anywhere close to what's actually going on right now. Like I'm pulling a 5.8 cap. And so if you're going to tell me that we're supposed to like be able to raise on this, that risk is way too high. So that price needs to come down. And I've been pretty successful at getting people to acquiesce and like bring stuff down. And
Yeah.
so that's the
Okay.
negotiating piece I like.
Yeah, no, no. Thank you for that point. That's definitely something I haven't really thought about, the mindset shift into thinking like, okay, this is giving me negotiation power,
Yeah.
That's not something that I really thought about. I mean, it's just kind of like one of those things you do, like you call them, you say, hey, this is what I found, based on my numbers are X, it is negotiation, but not really thinking about it in that term that,
Yeah.
I do have some power to negotiate.
Well, and for anybody listening that's either kind of getting the ball rolling with this thing or trying to break in, one of the best ways to build credibility with a broker is going through their OM, pulling their numbers, and then just hitting them back with, "Hey, listen, like I don't understand how you guys came to this specific number." Because then one of two things will happen. If they're a good broker, they'll write back and be like, these are our calculations. These were our projections. These were the assumptions we made. This is why it makes sense. What are you seeing? If they're a bad broker, they'll be like, I don't know. So it helps you to build that credibility with the broker that you know what you're talking about. You didn't just go on Cracksy, pull up some random property and say, oh, I like the way this looks. I'm interested, because the brokers get those contacts and they don't go anywhere. And so it's like, the broker is similar to a normal real estate agent, where if you have buyers who don't have funding, who aren't able to close, that's a lot of time that you spend trying to figure that out. And they obviously want to close. So by having a intelligent conversation and being able to point out those things, it also builds that credibility for you, which is great.
We know you're gonna like this episode, so please like, comment, and subscribe to this channel so you can be notified when the next episode drops.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us about your team of military investors and your strategy along the I-15 corridor. Why Idaho and Montana?
Yeah, so my team is made up. We've got two active duty officers, two active duty Navy officers, an active duty Marine, senior enlisted, so he's an 8, and then a Army veteran he just separated, Army officer. And we were initially looking up in Montana because, Montana in terms of explosive growth and expansion is really great, but there's not a lot of properties. So like Bozeman and all of those, any of the growing places up there. I mean, we spent what, 3 months trying to find properties, 4 months trying to find properties up in that area, and there just isn't. They're just, a lot of the institutional investors, they have their noses up there, so they're scooping up properties if they can, and it's just the competition is there because people know that you can make decent money. And so, going up from Utah, so Salt Lake is exploding, but there's some really experienced operators in Salt Lake. And so, but when you go north, so if you're building, what I've learned and what my team kind of came to is that we couldn't look in a primary market, because in a primary market, if you have an investor and they say, well, how many deals have you closed soup to nuts? Like, what's your cycle? And if you say none, then they're like, well, thank you, I'm going to take my money elsewhere. So you kind of have to build those reps. You have to build that credibility. And so you have to expand into secondary, potentially tertiary markets. So your smaller cities that are close enough to an MSA that it's not going to be, that you're not in podunk nothing land, and it's going to be really hard to get renters, raise rents, all that stuff, but not so big that you are then competing with these guys who smell the money and are doing everything they can to scoop it up. So all along the I-15 there, I mean, Idaho is growing, Montana is growing. Shoot up north from Salt Lake, there's a ton of growth all up along that. There's within the last year, I forget the different publications, but a number of different real estate publications talked about that whole corridor being expansive growth or explosive growth for real estate. And one of my partners is in Pocatello, Idaho. So he's boots on the ground there. And so he came across this property. Because he's boots on the ground, it made sense. Pocatello is growing. I mean, it's, Boise kind of became it kind of has become sort of like your Bozeman or your, not quite Salt Lake. Salt Lake is its own beast, but Boise, to break into Boise, there's a lot of competition there. Whereas Pocatello is growing. It's not quite where Boise, it's not where Boise is, but I mean, you've got a major university there. You got major, your Targets, Starbucks, Chick-fil-A's, Costco, all of the, big corporates that we like to see coming into a town are all there. So there's good opportunity. And so we were able to find this property and jump on it.
Nice, nice. Now, what lessons have you learned transitioning from single family rental to multifamily commercial deal? And were there any surprises along the way?
So definitely lesson learned. Commercial is a team sport. I think we hear that often, but I can't emphasize it enough. There's just a lot that has to go into a commercial that on a smaller deal, like, a seven unit complex, could a single person take it down? Yeah, probably, but it's just a lot. I mean, if that's if you have the time and the energy to be able to dedicate to taking down a property by yourself, okay, if that's your full-time job, but it is a lot. As a team, it's fun. Like, I mean, we have our weekly meetings. We're talking throughout the week as stuff comes up. We all have our individual responsibilities, and it's great to see everything progress and move as people accomplish their goals for this bigger end thing, which is great. I mean, in my opinion, it's well worth it, because then when we close on this deal, to be able to then turn around and scale into a syndication, if that's what we want to do next, or if we want to, I don't know stepwise what the plan is going to be, if we're going to try and, then take down like a 20 to 50 unit, or if we're just going to jump into a full syndication and go that route. But we have the team in place. We know our strengths. We're learning about our weaknesses. And so it'll be just that much easier, not necessarily easy, but easier to move forward as a team because of that. And I think in terms of surprises and things that I didn't expect is just, a single family, the laws and the way that things are in place, especially if you're working with a real estate agent and a mortgage broker and, all these different professionals who are there specifically to help you close. A lot of times the subtle challenges like the inspection reports and the title and getting title and all that stuff is kind of handled for you. And so it's just sort of, you can look at it and be like, yeah, okay, that's the title, fair, okay, it's clean. That means good to me, I'm happy. Whereas on commercial, you have to read the legal documentation. As an owner, you need to understand all these nuances because, like, for example, our purchase and sale agreement on this property, we didn't specify, and we would recommend this for anybody else, we didn't specify in there that the closing timeline doesn't start until all documentation, all financial due diligence documentations are received. And we didn't have that specific clause in there. And this is a lesson that we learned because we're going to have it in all future PSAs. And so we got all the financials from the owners, Great owner. I mean, they're easy to work with, but they're mom and pop, and the financial documents just aren't. They're not complete. And so
Mhm.
now we're having to go back and say, no, we need more stuff. We need this stuff. We need this and this and this to make sure that we're projecting accurately. So that way we can make sure and get this thing to close. And so it's just little things like that that I think I wasn't necessarily expecting to have to be as precise with. But now I know.
All right. So you said that the 7 unit was brought to you by one of your team members, and it's a mom and pop. So
Mhm.
was it off market?
So no, so they actually the broker it was put up. I don't know if he got it through Crexy or if it was emailed directly to him, but they've gone through a broker. They actually threw up an OM and the whole thing, and it was uh, we ended up the OM the price for the property was 870. We are getting it for 730 with seller financing because that was not even close to accurate in the OM.
Okay. And I'm glad you mentioned that. With the seller finance, even though it was through a broker, how did you guys approach the seller financing with the broker?
Sure, yeah. So so this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about building those relationships with the broker. Because if you get a property and you're going through it and you see those gaps that I was talking about in the underwriting, start opening up that communication with the broker is how we were able to get the seller financing with this. So their OM was not good. And part of that is I think the broker that was assigned to the specific property was relatively junior. And so I think that he didn't know what he doesn't know, which, is fine. Everybody's got to learn. But as I was going through the underwriting, just really their projections, their assumptions just didn't make sense. And so we went back and forth with the broker a couple of times, and it was really interesting. And I think that this is not uncommon because once we got down to it, I sat down with my team and I said, "Hey guys, listen, for us, they want 870,000 for this. There's no way we'll make any type of like we won't we'll lose money on this if we go at that price. In order for this to make any kind of sense for us, one, we have to get it for 730, if not less. So we're talking $150,000 less than what they asked, or than what was on the OM. And that's a big jump. I mean, especially, if we're talking about a $13 million property, 150,000 less isn't, okay, that's not that big a deal. But on an 870, I mean, what is that? That's almost 20% off or something. It's,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
right
that's,
somewhere around there. Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, that's a big discount, but we came at it from the angle of, okay, so here's the options. So, and this was actually something that I was taught through ADPI is that when it comes to seller financing and you're coming up with your offers, give them three options. Give them an option, which is their asking price. But if they get their asking price, it is with like, it's basically, they have to have all the concessions. They have to do everything, bend over backwards to make this work. And you have to, as the buyer, you have to make it as painful as possible for them to get their asking price, basically. Then you have a middle option, which is part seller financing, part investor, part bringing money to the table, kind of that middle ground. And then the third option is seller financing and 100% seller financing. Sorry, I said that. I got that first one a little bit backwards. Sorry. The first one, which is all cash, there would be really low purchase price, not their full purchase price. Full purchase price is with seller financing. Sorry, I got that a little bit backwards. So seller financing is where you make it, where you come in and that you say, okay, hey, listen, we'll give you close to what you're asking, but seller finance. This property, even with seller financing, didn't make sense at that 870 price. So I got down with my team and I said, listen, the only way that this property is going to make any sense is if we can get seller financing at 730 top, and their seller financing is at 5.5% for 3 years. That's it. This is the offer we're going to kick out to them. If they take it, great. If not, fine. And so we did, and we explained why. Like we went through with the broker and explained why, and he didn't reply to us. Like his like immediate email was, they're not going to go for this. But we knew because he responded within probably, I don't know, a couple of hours to our offer that no, they're not going to go for it. Well, you didn't even present it. He sat on it for a week. And then after a week, he came back and said, yeah, that's fine. So I think all of that to say, if you come across a deal and you do your underwriting and you realize that the only way the numbers will make sense for your team is for, to do seller financing, half traditional financing, whatever, throw it out there. I mean, just do it. Throw it out there. I think that our market right now is in a lot of places. People are still wrestling with the difference between what they think their property should be worth versus what people will pay for their property. And with real estate, any other, real estate, the value of your property is only what people will pay for it. It doesn't matter what it's assessed at. It doesn't matter what your numbers say. None of that matters. The value of your property is purely what somebody will buy it for. And I think a lot of sellers are still hung up in COVID land mindset where, if in COVID, your neighbor was able to sell their house that's very similar to yours for $700,000, and now you say, I want to sell mine, mine's in a little better shape, I should be able to sell mine for $720,000. Well, you're probably not gonna because things have changed, things have shifted. And a lot of sellers, I think, are still in that mindset. And so you just have to explain to them, like, okay, you think your property's worth 1.2 million, it's not. And here's why. Here's the problem. Interest rates right now, you're at a 6.5 cap is not going to cover a 7% interest rate on a loan. It's just not. And so you got to drop that price down, get that cap up to be able to cover that difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was just talking to a broker myself last week, and they said that sellers are now starting to realize that 2022 number, we're not in 2022 anymore.
Yeah.
And they're starting to really come to the realization that, okay, I'm going to have to make some of these concessions to get my deal sold. And then, of course, as both you and I know, that a lot of the actual sellers now are coming due with some of their loans that they had on the property. So, which unfortunately, no one could really see the forthcoming of the interest rates exploding north as they have.
Yep.
Unfortunately, no.
Well, and the
money to do both ends.
Yeah. And also the institutional cycle, because they typically hold their properties for 5 years and then have to get them off the books depending on what their policy is. But most of them do. Those are all coming due too. I mean, 2020, any of the institutionals who jumped on stuff in 2020, that's all starting to ping and it's going to keep coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the biggest misconceptions you think new investors have about commercial real estate?
That it's easy. I mean, that really is. I mean, I think that's it's the old idiom that if you think you're going to get rich quick, you're not. And I think that's the biggest thing, that if I can boot stomp anything for people who come in, is that yes, investment opportunity in real estate is incredible. Historically, real estate is one of the best investment vehicles you can get into. But keep in mind that statement is quite broad and there's a lot of variability in there. You can take $200 and throw it into a real estate investment trust. You can go on E-Trade, jump in a real estate investment trust, and technically you're investing in real estate. And some of those are great options. Some of those have good returns. Doesn't mean that's not obviously the same thing as being an operator. Somebody who turns, commercial real estate deals, who does single family, whatever. No matter what, you can watch your fix and flip, your house hunters, all of that stuff, and it seems like doing real estate is easy, but it's easy to also ignore the production that goes into that, all of the people involved with all those things. And whatever avenue you choose to get into in real estate, just know that it takes work. It takes work, it takes time, it takes energy. It's not easy, but it can be very worthwhile. It can be very and getting it the right deal can be incredibly lucrative in terms of money. But then I think it's important that when you take into account that it's not easy, then what that means is, in order to be consistent with this thing and be successful, you have to find something within real estate that you really enjoy, which is why partially I like commercial, is because on our team, the Marine I was talking about, incredible at understanding the subtleties of property management, construction, what needs to go into the property, what considerations. The property that we're buying has a sprinkler system that runs through the inside. And the first thing he said when he saw that was okay, how long has that been maintenance? What are the pipes? Is there a leak concern? All these things that matter that never would have occurred to me because that stuff is not my wheelhouse. Like, you want to go sniff the walls to see if there's asbestos in there, you knock yourself out. That's not me. So, but there's so much opportunity within commercial to find an aspect that you enjoy that allows you to be consistent and continue to do it, because it takes time, it takes work, it takes energy. And so I certainly think that piece, yeah, it's not easy, but it certainly can be very worthwhile.
All right. So you've mentored young men on healthy masculinity and balanced living. What sparked that passion, and what are the core messages you aim to share?
So the spark came because growing up, my dad was around. He had some personal stuff that was, that I didn't get. Like, I wasn't raised with a masculine father figure helping me understand what that was. So I had to figure it out on my own. And I think that our culture right now there's been such a focus on helping young women, increasing diversity, making sure that there's equality, which is all really great. As a psychologist, I love that stuff. I love that we as a culture have spent a large focus on making sure that there is a breadth and wealth of equality and opportunity for people. That's great. Part of the consequence of that, though, is I think young men in a lot of ways have also been forgotten. For a long time, men were just, we were privileged, we got all the things. And so by making the shift and bringing attention towards things that needed to happen, a lot of young men have been left behind. And I think you see that with a lot of the, with the incel stuff. I don't know if you know what that is, and a lot of the manosphere. So there's a whole online movement of young men that are getting into relatively negative, like sort of a machismo, that subjugation of women is not only appropriate, but should happen, and things need to go back to the way things were, where men were men and women were less than. And it's all this problematic thinking that isn't healthy.
Okay.
And so I got passionate about helping young men understand what it means to be a man and what healthy masculinity can look like, because I think there's just a need for it. I think a lot of guys are just having a really hard time. A lot of young guys are living at home. They still haven't figured out how to break out of that. A lot of times they're not in relationships. They're having a hard time figuring that out. And so the way that I address that is by, in your introduction, you kind of mentioned it. I look at kind of 4 pillars for health. You have your physical health, so your diet, exercise, sleep. From a mental health perspective, if I could get people eating right, exercising, and sleeping well, that would handle 70% of mental health problems. If I can give one message as a psychologist to your audience, that's it. Eat right, exercise, and sleep. It's amazing how much that takes care of in terms of mental health. And obviously there's other stuff. There's still the other 30%, but you get those 3 things handled, you're going to do pretty well. So physical health, financial health, and financial health includes your job, your career, what it is you do to bring in money, because money translates into freedom. Money translates into being able to do things in life that you value, that's important to you. The 4th then is your relationships, because that's a really important piece. You want to destroy your life very quickly, get in a bad relationship. Dating the wrong person, you can have so much going for you. You get connected to the wrong person. That's a really quick way to ruin things. And then the last one is spirituality. And spirituality, encompasses religion, faith, all of that good stuff. That's a really important piece that a lot of times is either neglected or just kind of pushed to the side. But in what I do, I found that the healthiest people that I work with, always it comes to there's always this question of, okay, where is spirituality, in order to kind of get to that place where you're starting to feel like a complete person, where you're starting to feel like, okay, I know where I'm at. So that's what I focus on.
Now, in your view, what are the biggest challenges men face today in living purposefully and with integrity?
Yeah, I think that I really appreciate that you added "and in integrity," because I think that piece is so easy for men to neglect and forget. I think the biggest challenge that men face right now is they aren't, as a society, as men, we're doing a bad job of supporting each other in being brave and having the courage to do the things that you need to do in order to get what you quote unquote want. And what I mean by that is, back when, we were younger, I'm 45. So back when this was before internet dating. If I wanted to talk to a girl, I had to get up the courage to like open my mouth and let something dumb fall out. And hopefully she thought it was cute. Half the time she didn't and would walk away fine. But with internet dating now, that whole element has shifted and changed. And with social media, a lot of that has changed. And so the need to be brave, to have that courage, which is having courage, being courageous isn't the absence of fear. In fact, you can't be brave, you can't be courageous without fear. You have to feel fear in order to be courageous. And it's just taking the action even though you are afraid. I don't think that young men are being taught how to do that. And that's an important piece of masculinity, is being able to recognize like, yeah, this is terrifying to me, but I'm going to do this thing anyway. And that translates into jobs. If you think you want to, I mean, on the ship, I was amazed at how many young men would come to me and be like, oh, I'm going to be a man, I'm going to be a world-class DJ. I'm going to be a world-class rapper. I'm going to do this, do this. And it's like, okay, but what have you done to do that thing? How many shows have you done? Oh, I'm not going to get up in front of people. Like, it's like, well, how are you going to be a DJ or a rapper if you're not going to get in front of people? Like, that's a part of that job. And so I think that it translates into anything that we do, of like helping men to understand, like, you can be brave and courageous in the world. And it's important to get out of your space and do that, and to push yourself to try things, even if it means that you might fail, even if it means you might be rejected, and to get off the computer, to get off the video games, because video games are just safe. I mean, if you're some hard ass, like hard charging special forces guy on your video game, but you're overweight, you're depressed, and you're not doing a whole lot at home, like that video game creates a false sense of courage, accomplishment, all of those things. And so in order to get that young man to feel that confidence in himself, we need to get him out. We need to get him out in the world. We need to get him exercising. We need to get him pushing himself, getting uncomfortable, having the courage to get out there and try things, even though he might be afraid, even though it might be uncomfortable, even though it might be hard. And I think that's really important.
Okay. And you're currently writing a book for expecting fathers. Yep. What inspired this project, and what do you hope readers can take away from it?
So it was inspired because we had my daughter. She is almost 2 now. And when my wife got pregnant, she was going through all the normal new mom things, looking up all the books and doing all the research and all the things. And she kept throwing books at me of like, this is for new dads, and look at this one and look at this one. And everyone that I looked at was written by women, which isn't bad. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's fine, but it's just a woman's perspective. And, and I realized like, it might help some guys to have a guy's perspective of what this is, especially because one of the things that when I've talked to my peers and other guys about becoming a new father, women have this really incredible experience of the baby growing inside of them. And so they already have a connection. They already have an entire like physical, visceral experience with that baby that then when the baby's born is already there. That's already established. Guys, we don't have that. When the mom is pregnant, it's just, she's sick. She's uncomfortable, she complains, we're supposed to rub her feet and do whatever, and it's just like we're just sort of there doing our best to try and keep her happy, but we feel fine. Like if I wanted to go out and go party with my buddies, I'd have a really mad wife, but I could do it. I would be fine. And so it's a very different experience that then when the baby comes and suddenly you have this little thing that is kind of weird. It probably looks like an alien, even though you might think it's cute. It cries and poos and pees and and nurses, and it's just weird. And so it's pretty normal for guys to not have an immediate like, I'm a dad, like my whole life has changed, like everything is so different now as soon as I looked into my baby's eyes. Some men have it. Great. Love it. That's great that you do. Others don't. And I think that for some guys, if they don't have that experience, they might feel like, well, I'm a bad father. Like I suck because I look at my baby and I don't feel this overwhelming sense of like, I love this child. That doesn't mean you're a bad dad. Becoming a dad takes time. Like as you continue to interact with that baby, as you continue to have experiences where the first time they smile at you, watching them roll over, like watching them explore the world, and you get to like influence that and contribute to that and help them grow. Like that's incredible. And so just really helping dads to know, like, it's okay if the first time you look at your baby, you're like, really? This is what I'm supposed to do now? That's okay. Obviously if you leave your baby in the hospital and you disappear, that makes you a bad father. So don't do that.
Yeah, love it. So, wow, as we start to wrap up this interview, as someone who excels in multiple fields, psychology, leadership, real estate, how do you stay grounded and prioritize what matters most?
It goes back to kind of what I was saying earlier of focusing on those four pillars. If any one of them gets out of whack, things start to fall. I gotta exercise. I have to, I have to work out. I have to be consistent with that. My relationship with my wife, my daughter, my family really matters. So I invest time into that. Obviously, career, focus, all of that stuff is, rock and rolling, and then spirituality, making sure that I try and take time. And so, and I, when I was younger and trying to figure out, okay, well, what does it mean to be successful? I would hear, when I listened to people like Tony Robbins or Oprah or whoever is super successful, they always talk about that time as their greatest commodity and that they don't have enough time. And so I think that when you're able to recognize that you have to not just prioritize one thing like your career, but you have to prioritize multiple things, it forces you to carve out and find time to make these little things happen. So an example of that is I walk my dog. While I'm walking my dog, I pray. And that's just a way for me to connect with that spiritual piece because as soon as I walk in the house, my daughter takes a ton of attention. Well, and that's really important to me because she's, that relationship there matters to me, and then once the baby's down, then I can shift into doing some underwriting because that's the career piece. And so I focus on that. And so you just figure out ways to navigate life and make it matter, all while also giving yourself a lot of grace too, because sometimes you might get sick, you might be exhausted. Maybe all you want to do is just collapse into the couch and watch some stupid show for an hour. That's fine. Like, have that grace with yourself that those things, that life happens, but keep picking yourself up, keep committing to your goals, keep committing to the things that you say are important, but within that balance framework. Because if any of that stuff gets out, if all you're doing is turning and burning and you're just doing your career and you're neglecting your relationships, there's so many examples of incredibly successful people who are so lonely and so depressed and hate their lives because they pushed all relationships to the side, and you don't want that. Don't be that person.
Yeah, I agree. Don't be that person. Don't be that guy.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
say, don't be that guy. So what advice would you give to other active duty service members who are curious about starting their own entrepreneurial or real estate investing journey?
Start now. Start now. If you're active duty, it is such a good time to start. There's so many opportunities for active duty members to begin doing entrepreneurial stuff. There's I forget the name of it. You might know it, Cedric. It's a nonprofit organization that specifically provides classes and training for veterans and active duty members. They give classes. I forget.
Are you talking about SCORE?
Maybe that's what it's called.
But okay.
But yeah, there's so many opportunities, and so the mindset piece that we talked about earlier. So one of the things with mindset is and I'm sure your listeners have had this experience. If you're going to go out and buy a car and you think, oh my gosh, I love this red RAV4, whatever, or even better, let's say a red Tundra truck. And you're like, nobody else has a red Tundra truck. I'm going to buy that truck. And then all of a sudden you buy the truck and you see tons of red Tundras everywhere. The reason that happens is because you've attuned your attention center to that specific thing. So you've attuned your attention to a red Tundra truck. And so now your brain intentionally goes out and tries to find those things as a way to say, okay, now that we need to see this thing, I see it everywhere. There's a whole evolutionary reason behind that. There's parts of the brain, there are other people who talk a lot about this, but basically, if you start to open your mind up to the idea of I need to pay attention to opportunities for entrepreneurism, for investment, to learn, to grow, to become better, you'll start to see those things. So for our active duty members, now is a great time to start because you have a consistent paycheck. You don't have to worry about, if you are sick, that your paycheck's going to stop. You don't have to worry about that if you're in the middle of a move, your paycheck is going to stop. Your paycheck is going to keep going. The only time you have to worry about your paycheck stopping is if Congress shuts down, which they haven't been doing, thankfully. But other than that, you don't have to worry about your paycheck stopping. So it's a great time because you have that confidence that no matter what, you have that consistent money coming in. This is a great time to learn, to grow, to try things, to experiment, to push yourself. If you're interested in entrepreneurialism, start learning about AI. I mean, start learning about AI. There's so many opportunities right now. Go on YouTube, learn stuff. Just like really, really take the time to commit to learning about entrepreneurialism, investment. If you're interested in real estate, there's so many great investment vehicles and ways to learn about real estate investing out there. You can find stuff.
Definitely. If there's anything that you want to find, you can find it. Sometimes take your, handheld computer and just literally search. That's why we have Google. As they say, Google it. Yeah.
Or
that too. Exactly. And you'd be surprised who are doing some of the things that you want to do.
Yeah.
But because you never asked the question, you would never know. Yep. Well, Brad, it has been a blast having you as our guest today. As we close out, please tell our listeners where we can learn more about you, get in touch with you, and learn about all the fabulous things you have going on right now. Awesome, Brad. Again, I want to thank you for your time today and all the wisdom you have provided to our listeners. It's greatly appreciated. And I want to thank you, our fans, for tuning into the Service to Syndication podcast, where we want to provide value to you and your investing business. Please tune in to our next episode, where we will interview another fantastic investing professional.
Thanks for listening to the Service to Syndication podcast. We want you to know that we love and appreciate your support, and we are grateful about being a part of your journey to becoming a successful real estate entrepreneur. Please share this episode with a friend who you think will get a lot out of what you just heard. Send it to someone who you know is interested in real estate and dreams of having it all and being the best they can be in all areas of life. And if this was really valuable, share it on your social media stories and timelines. Thank you for watching and listening. Now go be great.